Okay, welcome everybody to the CEFACT Global Trust Registry project. This meeting is on the Friday the 25th of July here in Australia, maybe other dates, maybe Thursday the 24th for some other people on the call. My fabulous co-lead, Alina Nikagales, I would hope is fast asleep in Spain right now at 2 a.m. in the morning. So we do these meetings sort of quite close together, where on the prior meeting 17 hours ago, she's an active participant, but on this meeting, I'm basically the sole representative of the leadership for the project. My name is John Phillips. I'm a co-founder of a company called Suzu, but for this project, I'm basically one of the CEFACT people working on the Global Trust Registry, but also on the United Nations Transparency Protocol. Today, I want to go through kind of what we talked about yesterday, highlight a few things some of the participants said and offered or suggested during yesterday's discussion. I won't have Alina to help me go through the agenda, so it'll unfortunately be my voice, but please put your hands up, voice up, or do whatever you need to do to attract my attention and participate. It's not meant to be just me rambling on. And as I think I just saw Marcus do, if you want to please put a little hello into the chat, please do so. It might be worth, since we don't have too many people, just going quickly around the room and saying who you are and kind of where you're from and what your interest is in the Global Trust Registry, if that's okay. I'm going to call names out because I know it's always difficult to know who goes first. So that in the order I'm seeing them on my screen. Paul, could you start?
Yes, thanks, John. So Paul Templeman, Australian, based in Washington, DC. I've been working with the Australian government's digital ID program since 2013 and applying it to the Australian sport industry. So effectively a sport digital identity guy, which is a bit weird, but now looking at this project. So yeah, worked on OpenID and Kantara working groups as well, where I know Mark from. So there.
Thank you, Paul. Kalari?
Hello, everybody. My name is Claire Schellover. I have a background in product identification and supply chain transparency, and of course, digital identity. I'm the CEO of Shadowbrook, and then we are boutique consultancy, project implementation, technology independent, but really interested in business registries for supply chain purposes. Have a strong background in food supply chain, which I'm interested in as well, and textile supply chain. So, yeah, that's me. Thanks.
Excellent. Mark?
Hello. So yeah, I'm Mark Lazar. So you get a picture of me there. I'm in Canada, and I've been working in digital identity and surveillance, and really in digital consent for a long time. I've been working on trust frameworks and digital identity registries as well. So I sort of started the Identity Trust Working Group in 2006 at Identity Commons, revving to go for what seems like I was really early, and it seems like today is the day where I should have be all excited to come and see what's going on. Because this was kind of what I was expecting when I first showed up at Identity Commons, going, well, we need to talk about identity trust, so it's been a while, so it's really great to see this work. I've been working on an international transparency standard and for consent, which is a notice and consent record information sharing structure. So that's come from like the Kantara initiative and sort of worked its way up from the Commons, and it's really about digital public privacy infrastructure and using the right instruments and the right tools for that. Really, I'm really sort of, though I'm a sociologist at heart, it's my background. So I really look at identity versus identification, and I see there's a big difference there. So for trust and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm glad to see this is going on. Thanks, John.
Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate that. And for all the people on the call, actually, if you've got, all of you have really interesting backgrounds and work you've got going on. So don't be shy about putting a link to some of the stuff you've been doing so the others can read into it. Because I know personally, because I have the benefit of knowing most of you, that there are some really great pieces of work you've either done or are contributing to. Marcos.
Yeah. Hello again, guys. from Spain originally. My background used to be technical. I'm a quantum physicist. I was working for, like, I've been on the identity space for about the last decade. When I joined the Inter-American Development Bank, I was living in DC as well for about 5 years. I live in emerging technologies at the Inter-American Development Bank, that for those who don't know, it is like the World Bank of Latam. It's like the largest development bank of Latam. And so I was privileged to do many projects from the area of identity credentials, in the area of health, digital government, education. And we began to see the problems related to the lack of trust registry. For example, in Latam, unlike in Europe, there's not a regional trust registry for anything. So when it came to COVID certificates, I was part of the technical team that worked with the World Health Organization to homogenize them. And Latin American countries ended up using the European trust registry for interoperability of COVID certificates, for example. So I've been in the topic for some time. Right now I'm working as a CEO of Verify, and we are implementing government IDs in Latin America, countries like Panama, El Salvador, and others. And so I'm very interested in collaborating with standards that enable some ways of doing global trust registry. So for those of us that are implementing solutions, we can make them scale cross border. So that's something of myself. I'm based in Central America.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Gondolia?
Hello, everyone. I'm Yes Cornelia from Director General of Foreign Trade, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. So I'm working as an associate over here, and we are working on the similar kind of thing, like how digital identity will help digital documents, verifiable documents, like how it will benefit to the cross-border trade document exchange over there.
Thank you. And Divaksh, if you can join us. You're on mute at the moment. Maybe not able to get off mute. Oh, here we go.
He's my colleague.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, let's let it looks like he's playing a game of table tennis from the avatar, but we'll just leave him.
Yeah,
just leave him
he's
be.
table
Okay.
tennis. Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's not get distracted. Too easy to get distracted. Okay. For the benefit of all, quickly say that there are codes of conduct for these United Nations CEFACT projects. There are links. All these slides will be available to everybody, including the links. And those codes of conduct sort of describe how we should behave, nicely towards each other, welcoming, are kind of things that we should do. And if, for example, a head of delegation, that's a United Nations representative for the UN CEFACT group, recommends somebody as an expert to the group to work with us, then we should welcome them in. And there are ways in which you can apply as for an expert status. So I can talk about those if we want in questions. And the other thing to note is that this work will produce recommendations and content. And if that content includes sort of intellectual property, that is treated as if is treated as royalty-free, kind of open use and access. So if you have proprietary systems and knowledge that you wish to retain, then you will need to sort of read the intellectual property rights and work out how to work with that. We're quite happy to work alongside and reference and use existing standards and other methods and so on. So it's just a case of being aware of what happens when you contribute content and how you want that to be handled. The links are on that slide. I'm going to rattle through quite quickly the kind of project scope, so we kind of get on the right page about what we're trying to achieve here. I made a very quick reference just then about we will write recommendations. So the outcome of this project will be a set of recommendations that go to the UN CEFACT plenary. That's a once a year meeting in Geneva in July. So the July 2026 is the target for this. We need to write our recommendations quite a few months ahead so they can read and review. And if they're approved, what happens is then these are recommendations that go to the members of the United Nations as to how they might do a thing. So we're writing about how you might do a thing, which is the Global Trust Registry as the name of the project. That name we inherited, Alina and I, back in January of this year. It's caused all sorts of interesting conversations about what do you mean by a global trust registry. It's the name of the project, as far as I'm concerned. The project might choose a different name for the system that it's recommending, and I've come up with an idea of a name for a system like the difficult to say UN CEFACT Authoritative Registry Directory, or CARD, but you can it's that sort of thing rather than a registry of trust, if you like. We don't claim sovereign rights over trust in the world or anything else glorious like that. A number of wills and won'ts are on this slide, and that's again important about what we are aiming to do and not do. We don't want to remove the sovereign. We cannot do anything about the sovereign rights of nations to decide what to register and what not to register, how they register businesses, how they recognize land. That's all their affair. We won't remove or supplant those that are issuing credentials themselves. We're not going to sort of be another issuer of credentials that undermines the business models of existing operations. So it's not that kind of system that we're trying to recommend. The best example probably for those on the call of a similar concept is maybe ICAO's PKD system for passports. So this is a system that lets us travel around the world where nation states decide to provide to the system of ICAO the public keys that they're currently using to sign their passports, such that other countries can decide to recognize those passports, or rather recognize the signatures on those passports when those people arrive. So the sovereign states still remain responsibility for their key management and everything else. They decide to participate in ICAO. It's voluntary, it's not mandatory, and it just enables us to travel around the world with our passports, which is a good thing if you want to do that. The three phases that we have in this project really are kind of understanding what exists. So we really do want to keep our eyes open about what's happening in the world. I know people like Marcos and others on this call actually are actively involved in very relevant systems and development and standards development and so on. So we don't want to reinvent any wheels. We want to pay attention to what's going on and make good use of that knowledge. Then we're going to define how we recognize things, what we recognize and how we recognize them. And we're going to provide a couple of pilots to see if what we're recommending actually works. So that's why I'm hopeful that when the British Columbian team come on board, they're one of the candidates for producing pilots. So are the Spanish in the registradores of Spain are very keen to do some implementations as well. Now, if you thought that was fast, I'm now going to go through the use case really quite quickly, but that's partly because I think for many of you, you kind of understand what we're talking about. But this is really talking about supply chains and trade. So UN CEFACT is the commerce and trade body of the United Nations. That's what it's interested in. Personal identity and so on is extraordinarily important for all of us, but it's not really the topic of conversation for this particular project. So think of a buyer who wants to have a new supplier for whatever it is they do. So a car assembly plant or whatever else wants to have a new supplier. The supplier comes along and says, here's my fabulous product. I've got these great samples for you to look at. And here are all my, if I'm a cyclist, I am occasionally, palmares. Here are the records of my achievements. I'm credited to these things and I have these sort of proofs of stuff. The buyer will want to verify these claims, check the product, make sure it's all okay. The claims, if we're thinking of them in our current context, we would like to be verifiable credentials, cryptographically protected digital or data sets that let us check that the data hasn't been changed since it was first written. It's been signed by a signature that we can check and so on. In the UNTP spec, these are W3C VC data model verifiable credentials, but for the benefit of this conversation, we can just think of them as a verifiable digital credential. There are two types of credentials that are kind of of direct interest for this use case: a digital product passport and a digital conformance credential. So the digital product passport is an idea that's now quite current in Europe and other parts of the world, where a product will have a digital product passport associated with its physical manifestation. That digital product passport will say a number of things about the shipper of the goods and the quality of the product and other attributes. The conformity credential is a claim you make saying we conform to this standard, or we reared these cattle on an organic paddock, or whatever else you're claiming about the product. And it's a conformity credential that somebody else generally has provided to you to say you conform to something. So these claims about the product and the manufacturer are kind of a status structure. And there are existing and evolving standards being proposed for these DPP kind of data structures. Europe has quite an advanced series of projects like Surpass 2, and so on DPPs. What the United Nations Transparency Protocol is doing is providing a kind of a generic model for a DPP as to sort of what it might contain. Now, you'll notice there's a business ID in there, business identifier in there, which is going to become important. It's signed and protected by some sort of DID key. And to a conversation Marcus and I were having, because I know some of you quite well understand the VC and DID world, the DID methods are becoming kind of more broadly widened in the UNTP spec. It's not just as it was very originally a DID web focused sort of initiative. They're now looking at DID web VH, but also other DID web methods. So as is the normal case, as long as the method can be resolved and it's a reliable repository, then kind of most DID methods will work fine. The question we really want to answer is the business ID valid? In other words, is this actually the supplier's business ID? Is it theirs to present, or are they masquerading as another company? Are they who they say they are? To answer that question, we need to find an authoritative source for companies registered in the place they claim to come from. So this is where another sort of anchor type credential comes into play, this digital identity anchor. There are some early design patterns for the digital identity anchor in the United Nations Transparency Protocol spec. And our job in this project is to kind of review those and potentially enhance or augment them to say how these might be adopted in the context of a global trust registry, how they might evolve or what they might need to have involved in them. The idea that's in the UNTP spec is that a digital identity anchor is issued by an authority, so a registrar. So I'll use the Spanish example. I'll use the Spanish example as registradores would issue a credential to a business saying you're registered in Spain. In Australia, it would be ASIC would issue it, and so on. And it will basically go through a process. The registrar will go through a process of checking the business to see it's a valid business. So at that point, this is whatever the system is used by the country, whatever the checks are used by the country, they go through these checks and these processes and decide whether to register this business according to their jurisdictional requirements. At the end of that, there will be some sort of identifier given to the business. In Australia, it's an Australian business number, ABN. And it could be other numbers, other types of terms are used for that identifier. In the model for UNTP, the business then says, fantastic, thank you very much for the identifier. And with that identifier, we want to associate the following keys, the following DIDs that we want to use for signing our stuff. So now we're kind of making this link between the identifier issued by the authority and the keys that the business is saying they want to use for that identifier, such that this sort of combined package can be released by authority to say, okay, here's a digital identity anchor that anchors the identifier and these DIDs that you're claiming you want to use. So this lets the buyer verify the supplier and the business ID and DID are registered with the same authority, but there's a big question still to answer, which we'll get to in a second. Divert slightly on conformity credentials, so similar sort of idea, we're checking a credential. A conformity credential is likely to be issued by some sort of assessor. An assessor needs to have some sort of license, be registered to give assessments. That assessing identifier is another kind of digital identity anchor. I have this right to do assessments. Here are these DIDs, and here's my identifier for this. So we go back to the buyer's decision. They can verify all the claims being made by this prospective supplier and decide whether they want to do business with them. So this is kind of cool, right? We can say that buyers need more than verifiable supply claims. They need evidence from authoritative registry. Fantastic. But the question is, what makes a registry authoritative? What's preventing the buyer, or rather the supplier, from fabricating a whole universe of fake kind of structures? So they create an authority that doesn't exist. They register with a fake authority. They issue credentials. They do things so that we need to find a way of getting a kind of like an anchor to a trustworthy source to know for sure that companies in Estonia are registered with this authority, and this is where I go to find the answer. So that's where this project comes in. And this next set of slides are really what Alina was working on. So Alina has a role in the Registradores of Spain on land asset register. She's a lawyer by background, so this has a very strong legal framework on a concept that the data that is registered needs to be within a sort of legal construct. That's respective to the country in which it is registered. So each country has their own legal system, and there's nothing this project will do to change that. It's up to them to decide what their laws are. Some of them may be a federated kind of structure. So Australia is a federation of states. Each state has its own registration process. They are consolidated towards one registrar in ASIC. Other nations may have more complex structures, so they could have multiple different parts of the country doing registration processes. They may be consolidated, so they're shown here. They may also be published directly. We were told at the Geneva conference that Alina was presenting at that Germany, for example, has a large number of registers for businesses, and that could be an area of complexity. And Barry's nodding, so I'm sure that's true. But beyond the law and the legal infrastructure around a registry are the basic way it works. So there's some sort of authority that's running this registry. That it's got some sort of governance process. It's got services. It's got operations. It's got a bunch of stuff, right? And it's got a bunch of data inside it. And there'll be likely for most jurisdictions where that equals like a country, a number of things we are interested in to do with supply chain. So land, organization, asset data, trademarks. These are all things of interest for supply chains. And so the kind of things we are going to be looking at are business registers, land registers, facility registers. So mining operations tend to have a facility license, and that could be true also for like chemical plants and things. Product registers, trademark registers, assets, and so on. And then there's a number of things we're going to be interested in about that register, like what do we call it? What's its name? What does it register? What's its legal basis? How does it issue identifiers, and what structure does it use for those identifiers? What's the authority that oversees it? And are there any digital services provided already that give access to data in some sort of verifiable way? What do they've already set up because they may have already made investments? I did a bit of AI deep research because I'm both lazy and curious. And I'll show you a slide in a second which shows you the kind of results we got, this one here. So this is available. The research is on our shared public drive for the project. This is in fact 28 different countries, and the details of 28 different countries and the types of registries that they operate that are interesting from a supply chain point of view, the legal basis of those registries, who is the managing government authority, what services do they provide, and is there any form of digital access or data verification. Now, it was generated by an AI engine running deep research, so we shouldn't just blindly trust the results here. But I think what you see is the sort of thing we're interested in creating in our directory. So if we can get what we want to have is a system whereby the registrars themselves volunteer to participate, but they keep their data up to date. We may check it, but we don't want to sort of keep, we don't want to be a Dun & Bradstreet or something. We're not going to go out and audit. We are more likely to ask the countries themselves to maintain their own accuracy of their own records. Once we've established kind of the bona fides that they are the right registrars to do it. And that then gave us this trust model for an authoritative registry. And we basically questioning how this sort of works in a sort of an operational sense. So this then leads, all this thinking has led to the way we think about the model, which I'll show you in a second. But pausing for a second, the idea of having a place you can go to see where the registers are for any country in the world of things that are interesting for supply chains seems to me to be a value proposition of some significance. If we can get that, even that as a recommendation up and running, that could be pretty useful. If we can get to the next phase of having universally used verifiable credentials and a kind of almost friction-free kind of process of verification, that's even better, right? That's even better. But the first step of getting just even an authoritative list of the registrars will be a pretty good thing. This is the model we're going to keep using, I think, from a representation point of view. So the way the model works is this circle here is the classic use of a UN type thing, the circle of colors from the UN flags. The links that I'm showing, you can see our trade registration verification. There are 4 pseudo kind of jurisdictions that I'm showing on this slide, where each of the jurisdictions, each country has a number of active people in supply chains. So we've got mining operations and processing plants and shipping plants and assembly and so on. And in this instance, I'm showing a theoretical car assembly plant that's got a supply coming from one jurisdiction who has a supply coming from another jurisdiction who has a supply coming from a third jurisdiction. So it's just a pattern thing. The idea is each of these participants is already registered with some authority. There's trade works, right? Global trade is working. People are doing things. They typically use a lot of paper, but they register already with some authority. And those authorities can decide if they wish to register with the UN CEFACT Authority Registry Directory. And if they do that, then the person at the far end here on the right-hand corner can do some checks to see both their suppliers are registered and others are too. So that then led us to the deliverables for the project. And there are, in fact, on the slides, we should be saying there are 5, in fact 6. So the implementation pilots you see in the bottom right-hand corner, we'll need to write some guidance for those. So there's an implementation guidance set as well. Now, what I did yesterday, and we got some interest in it, is at this point I paused because I said too much already, and also because wanted to leave time for some questions, but offers or volunteers for areas you're interested in. So what I'd like to sort of dwell on here is the type of things we've got on the screen are what we're going to be working on as a project team. So the digital identity, anchor, data structures, schemas, stuff like that, that's we're calling deliverable number 3. The requirements for registrars to meet, to be eligible, to be on the list, if you like. There are some basic requirements around legal requirements and so on. And those are number 1. The types of thing we're going to be interested in, that's going to be deliverable number 2. How we might govern this thing in the middle, what model does it follow? That's the deliverable number 4. And then we have these implementation pilots, which will be 5, and then the guidance is number 6. So now I'm going to pause and offer chances for questions and others. But also, if you want to put in the chat that anything you'd like to sort of be part of, or just call it out loud, please do so.
I think it's super clear what you presented, John. In my case, I'm going to review the links of each of them, like I'm going to analyze them to see in which ones I can add more value. And after that, I will sign up for those, John.
Great. Thank you very much, Marcus. Paul. Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry, where have you got gaps on?
Where have we got gaps? Got gaps everywhere, mate. As Marcus just suggested, these documents, I'll show them in a second, right? They're almost blank pieces of paper at the moment, and we're basically filling them out with, they're very much working drafts for people to put in suggestions, ideas, and as they get more mature, there'll be more work to sort of review the content and see whether it's sort of making sense, and I'll be getting towards the final versions of these recommendations. So at the moment, it's very much a working draft. I kind of expect that these areas and topics are quite different. We might even split into the meetings so the people that want to talk about governance for some central system can talk about that without boring people who want to talk about data structures for DIAs. Yeah, so you might split in those ways. So at the moment, the gaps I would suggest are plain to see, and wherever you want to look. That's not to say that there isn't existing work. So Marcus, I know, has already contributed some ideas that I need to look at on the DIA kind of stuff. There's some work in UNTP. So it's not that we're starting from scratch. It's just that there's work everywhere to do.
Yeah, I'm probably happy to put my hand up in the governance area if that's of interest. So.
Cool. It will be. And now I'll explain about participation for this. So I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that there's a UN CEFACT expert registration process, and I think some of you may have already been through that. And sometimes it's a bit slow in terms of the processing that occurs after you put in your application. So what Alina and I are very happy to do is to recognize those that have already applied, because in applying, you've accepted the kind of intellectual property rights and conditions and so on. And then we'll just let you edit these documents. So these documents, and I'll now show you a couple of examples maybe, are documents that are Google Docs because we will likely move in the near future towards a GitLab environment that has been set up for UNCFAC projects. But I feel that for most contributors, they'll be familiar with a sort of more desktop office collaboration type tool system than doing forks and pull requests to make changes to documents. So I'm likely to stick with this for a while at least. And then what we'll do is manage the sharing rights. So if I show you the sharing rights in this document, basically there are a few people already named as editors for this document. We'll add in people when people say they want to contribute and they're already, you know, applied to be an expert or already are an expert, then we'll add them to the editors of the document. But anybody with the link can comment. So the idea will be that anybody is able to comment on these documents, provide suggestions, and then the editors can make decisions about how, if and how to incorporate them. So this particular document from Alina, each document has the same sort of structure. I am lazy by nature as much as I can be, so they have many common elements. So this image is shared across each of these documents, and if I update it, there's a little update that I just did that you'll see pop in. So that shows you this implementation guidelines appearing. The same is true for the about the project. That's the same in each of these 6 deliverables. The purpose and scope is going to be unique for each document. We're going to use the BCP classic kind of capitalized requirement statements. So must not, required, and so on will be used. We have a glossary of terms that again is shared across all these documents. And then we get into the guts of what the document is. And in this case, you'll see there are already some reasonably thought through requirements for how or what a registry might need to have in place for it to be recognized as an authoritative registry. Now, these will need to go through review processes. The moment Alina's been the primary, Alina and her team in Spain have been the primary authors of this content. So we're going to get people to sort of go over this to sort of say, are these reasonable, sufficient, are there gaps that we need to fill, and so on. And I picked up a comment, for example, that they've used particularly legal-esque terms, erga omnes, which I'm not entirely sure most of us have heard before, but it's a Latin phrase used in law. And I think the sentence stands without that, but we'll see. So that's how the project deliverables work. They're all inside a folder that, again, has open access to anybody. Anybody with the link can open this folder and look at the files that are there. They'll have this sort of view only or comment only kind of access to the content. But the idea is to allow collaboration as best we can. So to long answer now short, if you've registered or applied to register, tell Alina and I, and tell us where you want to work, and we'll add you to the documents to be an editor of the documents. And if you're in the meantime, you can still read, review, and provide suggestions as a comment, if you like, inside these documents. And that's the way we'll kind of move forward. If I go back to the deck, I was kind of explaining how these things work, the same sort of structures across all of these documents, because I'm lazy. And this is just an example of the upstream thinking that comes out of the UNTP. This upstream thinking says that if I'm a car assembly company, I might be told by a supplier a bunch of things about their product, but now for scope 3 type emission requirements, or for modern slavery, or for other types of things that require you to think further upstream, I now need to know more about the supplier to my supplier and the supplier to their supplier, and so on. So I might need to go, say, 3 steps back. And the way the UNTP works, this is probably directly related to what Mark's work has been, is this idea of the data is made available by the issuer. So the companies that are participating effectively publish their claims, their verifiable credentials, and make them accessible. And they make them accessible according to whatever rule they feel is necessary from a commercial and a legal point of view. So that some data might be commercially sensitive, only available to your direct customer. You might not or have to or might not want to tell your customer who your suppliers are in some circumstances, because you might get disintermediated. There are a bunch of reasons why the data isn't always made fully available, but the basic principle is using linked data structures, you should be able to sort of navigate your way across what they're calling a transparency graph to find out more about the upstream supply chain. And that's sort of the way that the UNTP model works. We started this project in sort of April, May. We're in the middle of sort of middle end of July now. So we're still on the main sort of two streams of work. digital identity anchors and the requirements for the sort of trust registry self-governance requirements, with a pretty tight deadline. So we would hope to be working on these pilots before the end of the year, and I have all the documents ready at the end of the calendar year, such that we give enough time for the review process that occurs in the UN CEFACT plenary. I did mention a little bit about we're using Google stuff. Apologies if you don't like Google, but that's what we're using and it's free. So there you go. We will likely supersede this to another format when that is available. Right now, the UNTP project is moving from a GitHub environment to a GitLab environment due to licensing rules. There is also a UN CEFACT collaboration environment, CUE. That's Collaborative UN CEFACT Environment, CUE. That's based on a Atlassian Confluence type environment, but it's very constrained and it's templated, so I can't do very much with it other than publish some deadlines and so on. So it's not a very easy place to collaborate, and you can only collaborate in there if you're an expert and you've got a login for the UN CEFACT queue. So it sort of restricts how we can participate, but I will likely move to this GitLab space in the near future. Once that's sort of stable. That's it. I try to keep these meetings to within 50 minutes because I suspect most of you, if you have another meeting coming, will have it at the top of the hour. Paul.
Just a quick one. I'm keen to understand whether this is going to work in with the other UN programs around digital public infrastructure. So you've got, in UNDP working on and World Bank working on digital public infrastructure. You've got ITU working on digital wallets, and then you've got this project obviously looking at trade.
Yeah.
And I could almost see
why don't we do it? Yeah. And there's others. There are others, Paul.
Yeah.
I mean, you're very right. Okay, the question is extremely important, and it's very right. That's what the awareness thing on the first action or continuing action really for this project that I want to maintain, where we realize there's a aligned or similar sort of activity. I really do want to reach out to those people leading it to see what we can do to avoid reinventing wheels, confusing the stories, or whatever we're doing. So to add to your list, there's another WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Office, working on a project that we've already been talking to about what they're doing, because it is related to trade if people claim intellectual property rights over products and so on. So you're so right. There's so many things going on at once, even just within the UN. And of course, there's many other things going on within other consortium sort of environments, like the European space, Asia Pacific even, and others. So yes, we'll try not to repeat anything as best we can and align with everything as best we can. But even that's kind of tricky, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, for my request back to you and all of you on the call is, if you know of projects we should be connecting with, send me and Alina a link, and we'll do our best to connect with the project. And even better, if you know the people we should speak to in those projects, then we'll reach out to those people.
Yeah, John, I just heard that at the ISO TC 307, that is the blockchain working group at the ISO, they are creating now a working group for infrastructure. This I'm also one of the representatives at that working group by a regional entity at Latin America, but I haven't been engaged recently, and I'm going to actually now figure out about this project and see how can I help as well. So as soon as I figure out more, I will also socialize it here so we can coordinate effort.
Thank you very much. And so what I will do with all these is put them in a place that everybody can see, so at least we can share back. These are the projects we've been told about, the initiatives that we've been advised about, where we're trying to sort of pay attention to, so that you know that your suggestion, oh, by the way, this is happening, has been heard, and we've made some note of it somewhere, and we're trying to follow up on it. So it'll also help me not to forget about what we're doing. Clary.
John, I think the projects which are running already with the trust registry for Sweden Germany, we should definitely include them.
Hmm.
They're issuing already VCs for their companies register.
Yes,
So
and that's a really good point, Clary. And it goes to, we didn't mention GLIFE yet, right? The Global Legal Entity Identity Foundation, and there's, so my philosophy, my thinking idea at the moment is that, for example, with those countries that you just mentioned, we confirm, if you like, the projects and who's running them and what they're doing. They become, in a sense, a line in the registry that in this jurisdiction, these are the places where things are registered. This is what they register. This is how they're making things digitally available. So on that table, if you remember, I was showing the right-hand side was this digital access and verification. So we keep note of what initiatives they have and what they're how they're publishing, what they're doing.
That's great. I mean, what you've described, we are basically the register of the registers, right? So very simple explained. And these are at least projects and initiatives which are at the spearheading, especially with new technology, like we want to see with VCs, and to have them and their input, because they are a user on one hand, but a contributor. That would be really helpful to see as well what kind of attributes and data sets they have in their registries, what are mandatory attributes, what are voluntarily attributes or optional ones, so that we have a core when we have to define the data set.
So right, and that's why you're on the project, Larry. No, the other thing that I guess the wildly ambitious part of this project is that I anticipate fully there's a spectrum of efforts going on across the world in different plants, and there are levels of maturity and advance, and they're all going to be quite different. So this project is going to try to make some recommendations that could be universally applied, and there are ideas that are around. There's an initiative called GLU that's, I think it's under IETF, about sort of it's a type of like a wrapper for identifiers, like how you might sort of wrap around anybody else's identifier to allow them to have their own identifier, but you've got to, so there's a number of ways of thinking about how we might allow people to do what they currently do and not make any changes to it, but to somehow allow this interoperability or recognition. Why I say it's wildly ambitious is that we may make recommendations for what might be sensible. We have no mandate to force people to do things, and in a sense, nor should we, right? It's about countries can decide what they decide to do. We can make recommendations, and hopefully we make sensible recommendations more than decide to follow. But it's if they've invested lots of money and lots of political will in something, you can't expect them to change necessarily. We'll see what happens. Okay, that's near the 10 minutes before the top of the hour time. I guess the other thing I haven't mentioned too closely is there's a groups.io email group I've been using. So if do you all have access to that at the moment? Do you all know it's there? Shall I share the link to that on this chat so you've got it? I think most of you are in.
I think important to know is that when you use this email address, it goes to everybody, right?
Yes, you can. Yes, it's a group email thing, right? So yes, it does go to everyone. Sorry about that, Clary. I know you sent me something.
No, I realized that yesterday. That's fine. I thought that was
okay.
your alias as a share.
Groups.io, I think, will let you reach out to an individual. I think you can do that through Groups.io. But yes, it's mostly a broadcast mechanism to sort of share to the team, the people that are interested. So yes, it's like using reply all in an email system. So there's a groups, and there's also a Slack channel. So on the front page of the groups.io page, there's a Slack channel. I found fewer people on the Slack channel than are on the groups space. This is the Slack channel, but the Slack channel it was set up under the UNTP and UN CEFACT sort of login for Slack. So you'll see also the UNTP chat in there as well. That's it, I think, for me. That's all I want to do. So what I really want to do over the next 2 weeks, these meetings are every 2 weeks, is to really nail down asynchronously in communication with any of you and others, kind of who's doing what, how we're making progress, what people can do to help, and so on. That's the aim from now on. We've got some really interesting things to try and work on and deliver. So it's great to sort of see you all here.
Thank you very much, John.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you all, and have a great weekend.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
See you.
Bye.
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 Yeah, I also want to ask about the VC4 trade projects. Is it kickoff or what's the stage of that project?
Sorry, Devash, say the name again of the project.
VC4 trade. I think we have
VC4 trade. Oh yes, yes,
Uh,
very much related. So
yes.
Steve Capel is probably the catalyst for UNTP, this Global Trust Registry project, and VC4 Trade. I guess the way to they're each of them at, it's like working on a jigsaw puzzle where everybody's working on a slightly different part of the same jigsaw puzzle. So it's very much a related project. It's very much a part of the CEFACT sort of fabric of projects. And if you're interested in it, I encourage you to join in on that group as well. It should have the same requirements in the sense of open access to discussion and content. And in a sense, yes, it's one of the other things I need to keep my eyes on, as does Alina, as to what's happening across even our own projects inside CEFACT. Because I hold this idea, I want to be as lazy as I can be, but no lazier. So if someone's already come up with a good idea for something, great, I'll use that then. I don't want to think of things I don't have to think of.
Okay. Actually, we have. I think we have submitted our nomination from the as a Moin of AXO. So we have sent a nomination to them, but we haven't heard back yet for the VC4 trade.
Okay.
What's going on?
Are you communicating with? I think if I look it up, I could probably find who's leading that project. I think I should remember. I can't remember who it is. I do. I know the person. I just can't think of their name right now. If you want me to, I can try and follow up for you. If there's something that you haven't had a response from, I'll see if I can find it. Send me an email or something.
Yeah, I have. We will share one email ID. We are communicating from the trade finance -dgft at gov.in. Actually, we have also had a meeting with you prior to this project.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were I am extremely pleased and excited to have the Indian delegations join us, because that's a huge addition, if you like, to the credibility of the project, for all sorts of very positive reasons with trade and initiatives that are going on. So absolutely reach out if there's something where we don't seem to have replied to or responded to something. Don't hesitate to reach out and remind us that we need to respond to or do something. And if you want, feel free to use me for a while, and I'll direct traffic to those others working on projects in CEFACT as well.
Yeah, that will work. Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
Again, last meeting we were not able to join due to some of our internal meetings, so that's why 2 weeks we are in the mood that when we will able to, what is the progress of this one right now.
Okay, 2 weeks. Okay, let's get busy. Okay, I should let you go and close off, if that's okay. Unless you have is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Thank you for.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much, Galilea. I'll see you hopefully in the next calls and online meetup.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.